Hi, my name is DM Barr. I'm wearing a headset today. That's why you might not recognize me. I write tales of sex, suspense, and satire. My latest novel is called Saving Grace, a psychological thriller, and it will be released on October 15th, but it is currently available for pre order. Kirkus calls it excellently paced and says it's an intriguing murder mystery, a wild ride whose propulsive energy will keep readers turning pages. So please order your copy today. My guest on Author Groupie is Michael Deeze, a veteran and physician who started writing late in life and whose trilogy captures the essence of his own upbringing and serves as a tribute to the members of his family. He'll read from his third book, The Heretic, which just came out in June. So please sit back, enjoy, and as always, stay safe. Welcome to another edition of Author Groupie. I'm here with Michael Deeze. He was named one of the 25 hottest indie authors of 2018 by Indie's Author magazine for his short stories. And on June 17th, he put out the final book, or at least the third book of his trilogy called The Heretic, which follows the first two in the trilogy, Forgive Me, Father, and For I Have Sinned. A physician and veteran, Dr. Mike was forced into retirement in the spring of 2019 after a quadruple bypass. I'm sorry, my mom had something similar. You ended up better, thank goodness. His first two novels were published by Outskirts Press, and his latest book was put out by Indie's United Publishing House. In his spare time, he is creating the Legacy Project, which teaches people how to create an oral history out of their life experiences. So welcome to Author Groupie.
Welcome. Well, I'm glad to be here.
Thank you. Did I get all that information correct?
Pretty much. Yeah, those are the high spots.
Okay, great. Well, I understand that this latest book was the longest to write and the one that was the most deeply personal. Do you want to explain a little bit about the trilogy and this last book in particular?
The trilogy is the main protagonist in the book is a fellow named Emmett Casey, who comes from a deeply Irish Catholic background to parents that were the greatest generation, the post-World War II, and who migrated to Chicago at the end of the war. And he is raised in poverty in the inner city ghetto, where he learns to fend for himself. The trouble with it is that even though he's raised with lots of good values, trouble has a way of finding him. And he at first welcomes it, and after a while he can't escape it. And he has a hard time separating his identity from his bad luck. Goes to war, distinguishes himself in Vietnam, and finds out that he is capable of far worse things than he imagined. And he comes back from there damaged to a world that didn't want him and was ashamed of him at the end of World War II. And he takes that to be judgment about what has happened to him from then and before then, and embraces a life of crime. And he's very smart, he's very good at it, and his services are in demand. And he slowly but surely embeds himself farther and farther into criminal society until he hits a dead end and there's no way out. And it's his life is to forfeit. And the only escape that he has is he finally goes back and asks his father for help.
So deeply personal. Are you telling me you're a criminal? Am I getting the scoop?
It's deeply personal because I incorporate an awful lot of personal experiences into the writing. And I guess I'm a firm believer that if you really want to create a scene that other people can see when they read it, you probably should write about something you've seen yourself.
Absolutely.
Unfortunately, my background did sort of embrace those ways for a long time, especially after I got back from um, Southeast Asia. And it took me a long time to find myself. And uh, after that, I rattled around, was aroused about, did different things, and lived a very interesting life. And it wasn't until my mid 30s that I actually went back to school to become a physician.
Wow.
And I didn't marry until late in life, and so my children only knew me as a physician, country doctor, did a lot of house calls, and but also knew that I had kind of a unique take on life. So I started writing small, short stories so that they might understand where I came from. And the more of these little stories that I wrote, um, I found out that my children were a lot less interested than everybody else that I knew was. And slowly but
Yeah.
surely, they evolved into a narrative, which I then fictionalized in order to make it interesting.
So you started writing later in life. Was it specifically to document your life for your kids?
That was the initial uh, impetus for it. What really happened was my father and I had a very unique love-hate relationship. It's a terrible thing when you grow to adulthood and you realize that the one person that you never wanted to be, you became. And so uh, he and I were at odds for a long time, and then afterwards, we're the best of friends. And near the end of his life, he descended into dementia. And his entire life, we would ask him, "Hey, Dad, what did you do in the war, Dad? What was it like? Did you shoot guys? Did you do this?" Well, we knew that he had been a tail gunner on a B-17 bomber and that he'd flown 26 missions. And the life expectancy of a tail gunner is about 5 missions. So, which I found out through research, but he would never talk about it. His statement was always, "If you have to talk about it, you probably weren't there."
Wow.
And I found out how true that statement is myself through my own personal experiences. But at the end of his life, just as he started to slip away, he gave me his diary. And he had kept a diary of every single mission that he flew through North Africa, Sicily, Italy, into Germany, and um, and kept track of it. And it was, he very much related it, but it was very personal. In the air, 7 hours, 52 minutes. Lost the waist gunner, had no landing gear. Um, Came in, flaps shot off, bullets shot to pieces. Lost the co-pilot today. That kind of thing. And at the end of every chapter, the last line of every chapter was, "We go again tomorrow."
Wow. Wow. So
So,
fascinating stuff. Um, is your father incorporated into your writing as well then?
he's one of the hero figures that appears. The second book really features him in a lot of different ways, or at least the person behind who he really was. A figure of some stalwart strength and things like that. But if I had read that diary when I was a young man, I would have understood him so much better. And we could have been friends, so much sooner. And I started to realize that especially as my boys were growing up, that they deserved more than what I was giving them. Not telling them if you have to ask, then you probably weren't there.
So
That kind of a.
I'm sorry, I'm going to move a question up that was toward the end. What you're saying now, is that what gave the impetus to starting the Legacy Project? Yes?
Uh-oh, I lost you there. I
Oh,
didn't hear the question.
let
You
me
glitched out.
repeat it. What you're saying now about the relationship with your dad and how you want to talk more for your kids, is that what was the impetus for starting the Legacy Project, where you could leave your oral history for your kids?
Yes, exactly. And you know, to even bring it home further, in the diary, my dad's, there was a little card that was, if you're an Irish Catholic, you know what a prayer card is. You have your holy cards, and one of the holy cards said that when we're young, our grandparents want to tell us stories, but we're not interested, so we don't listen. And later on, we wish we'd written them down.
Yeah, yeah.
And what I began to realize is, in telling people these stories and in talking about the books, everybody has a very unique tapestry of a life that brought them to this particular point, that built their character, that made them who they are. And even the most seemingly innocuous portions of that story were really character builders, or they really shaved the sharp edges off of their personality and are worth sharing, especially with our family. You know, all of these people that you end up going to funerals and or funeral receptions, and you stand in the line, and people will come up and say, "Oh, when he was a young man, let me tell you what he did," or, "Oh boy, we sure did these things," or, "Did you know that he was the impetus behind this culture center," or something like that. And the family stands there absolutely, blown away, because they never knew that.
Yeah.
And so what I have been trying to do is, particularly at the senior living facilities and those types of things, using my books as a lever, I go into these centers and we talk about the books, but then we talk about how important it is for them to tell their story. And now, with some help, I'm glad to say that many of the centers now are furnishing computer setups with thumb drives for each individual one, so that these people can go in and someone will help them if they're not techno savvy, and just tell a story, talk a little bit about this or that, or something else. And it's heartbreaking, some of the stories that they share. I could sit here for 2 hours easy and tell you stories that people want to tell, that are just heartbreakingly sweet or special, and they come out of people that you would never expect.
Wow, that's
So
great.
it is.
Do you think you would help them publish those stories?
I would really like to, and I would really like to have them, if nothing else, when these people pass away, and they do, be able to take that thumb drive and give it to the kids and say, "Here, this is something, this is his last gift, this is her last gift, this is the story of her life."
Right.
And it told in a way that you've never heard before. Because we've heard the stories. We've heard the stories about Aunt Tess, who had too much to drink at Thanksgiving and got to laughing in Peter Pants. Because those are the stories that everybody tells when they get together and things like that. But what we don't tell the stories about is the heartbreak that they had, or the doubts that they had about something, or um, something just silly but important. I had a fellow tell me he was a Marine in Korea, and he said the best Christmas I ever had wasn't in the United States, it was in Korea. And he said we got a box of cookies from home, and everybody gathered around, and at the bottom of the box they had cut a piece off the Christmas tree, and we held the Christmas tree and passed it around to everybody in the barracks. Somebody got out a harmonica, and we sang Christmas carols in the dark with the Christmas tree. And he said it was magical.
Oh, that's so
And it was
nice.
like, what a sweet little, not a big deal story, but probably not one that he had told very often.
No, that's wonderful. So I'm going to come back to your books. And you said that they were somewhat autobiographical. Do you think that the reason your books are so long, like 300 and 400 pages long, is because you've lived through so much of what you're describing?
Well, it might just be because I don't know how to finish a sentence.
Well, editors are good people.
Yes, they are, and thank heavens for them.
Yeah.
I do love a run-on sentence, they tell me. I think that the story is contiguous from the first to the second to the third book. And we watch this fellow age, and we watch him try to mature. But in a way, all of the main characters are different aspects of the same personality. And the ones that we admire and wish we were, and the ones that we do our best to live down, are all the same character builders, so to speak. But what I did was I took them and separated them into different people so that they could be looked at for what they really were and what really made them tick. And so, yeah, it's a little bit longer, but I also like people to be able to say, you know, when I read that scene, I was right there. I could see what you were seeing. And I think that's the most important thing to me in my writing.
Absolutely. Well, do you think that now that you've written, wow, over about 1,000 pages with these, or over that with these 3 books, is there going to be a 4th in the series, or are you going to move on to something else?
Well, that's the $54,000 question that everybody seems to be asking me. And they're telling me that they haven't had enough of Emmett Casey. And we may just have to go back and revisit someplace between book 2 and book 3, and see if we can make him maybe just a little less adventurous, or at least a little bit less of a tomcat, so that people like him a little better.
Give him a dog. We all like
He's got
people
a
who
dog.
have dogs. Oh, he has a dog? Okay, we all like people who have dogs. So you chose to publish without...
He's got a few dogs.
Oh, good. Then I'll like to read about him. I always like to read about dog owners. You chose to publish through Outskirts Press rather than a small press or a traditional press, or even to self-publish. Can you explain why you took that path, and then why you switched to Indies United, and how that is different for you?
Well, I think that, I came to this pretty late. I didn't really start writing until about 4, maybe 5 years ago. I hadn't ever done any, and I was a terrible student, by the way. So I like to read, but I don't like to do the homework. But I thought the story needed to be written. At any rate, I've managed to make, I think, just about any and every mistake you can possibly make as a new author. I've gone with the wrong publishing house. I've gone. I started with one group. I switched to Outskirts. I really liked the resources that they had, And I really liked their ability to create the graphic images that I wanted and their layout. And when it came right down to it, uh, there was not really a lot of after publishing support. And as a noob, I had lots of questions that I couldn't really get answered. So when it came time with the third book, I did shop it a little bit, and Indies was great, really great, very enthusiastic. And in fact, I pulled the first two books and had them republished and by Indies. So now they're all available through Indies United.
And you've been happy with them?
I've been very happy with them.
Okay,
Yeah.
I don't think that a lot of people know of that house, so that's why I just wanted you to talk about it a little in case people would be interested in working with them.
Yeah, they're super responsive, very hands-on, and maybe it's just me because I, can hardly find my butt with a flashlight. But it also, I mean, the editor Jenny Rosenbaum and the publisher Lisa Orban, really good people too, and so it's been my pleasure to work with them. And like I told her when I first went to them, they're the greatest books never read. So do what you can.
Well, I'm glad they've helped you find an audience. Would you like to read a few pages from The Heretic, which is your newest book?
I would be glad to.
All right, wonderful.
We took a poll to see which ones I should read, and I was surprised at where it ended up. So we'll read a little bit about my grandmother.
Okay, wonderful.
About Emmett Casey's grandmother. So this is Maggie O'Donnell. Go fish. I looked up at her face. Her lips frowned, but her eyes smiled. She had an unusual way of cocking her head to the side, lidding her eyes and smiling in a way that only touched the corners of her mouth. And unless you had seen it 100 times, you wouldn't know it was a good look. It was a secret, private look that she shared only when we were alone. And I would have crawled through broken glass to get it. It felt that special. I look forward to these days where she and I spent the afternoon alone in the old house. During those times, I was treated to a different secret side of her. Larger than life, the unquestioned ruler of the Casey clan, she was stalwart, strong-willed, and unwaveringly honest. She could be humorous and clever, streetwise and smart, but very ruthless when one of the family was threatened. When we were alone, she didn't need to be anything other than herself, and that person was fun to be around. I reached and took another card from the scattered deck on the small folding table. She was not about to let me win if she could help it. Have you been practicing? She said. Yes, grandmother. How's it going? Do you have any fours? It's hard. As I pulled the 2 fours out that I'd been hoarding and handed them to her, Dad almost surprised me the other day. Your father never had a talent for it. Didn't like it. She put the new cards into her hand and sighed, and her gaze drifted toward the window. Always his father's son he was. She favored me with a sly, one-eyed wink. You're more after my side of the family, the O'Donnells. Well, I can do it more often than I used to. It was midsummer, and even with the windows open, there was little breeze to cool the room. The air was heavy, humid, and hot, full of the smell of floor wax, old varnish, and dark wood. The card game had digressed and become a desultory exercise. She tapped her chin and said, "Help me outside, Em. I need some fresh air." We shuffled down the hall, her slippers scuffing along the tiny hardwood floor. The quiet hardwood floor. By the time she had reached the kitchen, Maggie was almost in full stride and only lightly holding my shoulder. She pushed her way through and onto the back porch where another rocking chair waited, and easing herself into the chair, she took a deep breath and closed her eyes. Outside, the air smelled of dust and mowed grass. Cicadas were in full throat, and somewhere close a house wren rejoiced in the heat and sun of mid-afternoon July. Tea! It was a demand and a request all at the same time. I went back in and got the tea ball out and spooned the loose leaves into the little container, getting it ready for the water to be hot. No tea bags for Maggie O'Donnell Casey. That was not the way the good people took their tea. Waiting for the whistle of the kettle to alert me, I returned to the porch. Do you know where the smokes are? Yes, Grandma, the red flower pot. Well, they're not going to walk over here on their own, are they? No, Grandma. I lifted down the pot and noticed the pack of Lucky Strike cigarettes only had a couple left. I shook one out and struck a match on the side of the house. Lighting it, I passed it to her. She nodded to me and pointed at the pack. I took out another. I started smoking when I was 13. Of course, I'd chewed tobacco before that, but I never liked it much. She took a long pull in the cigarette. How old are you now, Emmett? I'm 12. Always precocious. All right, show me. Right here. Yes, right here. Use the maple tree. Pointing to her right, where a 10-inch thick maple wood stood shading the back porch in the house. The knot just below the first two limbs. I pulled the knife from my back pocket and unsheathed it. It was one of our secrets. The knife had once been hers. I only hazarded carrying it on these private days that we spent together. The handle always warm to my touch and a perfect fit, the blade dull gray carbon steel and double-edged, honed sharp enough to cut dry leather. I set my feet and brought my arm back while I judged the distance. No, too long, too long. Think long, think wrong, Emmett. You need to just do it, not think about it. I have trouble when I do it that way. Give it to me. She held out her impossibly huge red knuckles and crooked fingers, and taking the knife, she turned it in her hands and regarded it as one would a loved one. This is not a toy, Emmett. This is a weapon, and you must never give up a weapon unless you have another, or if you're sure you won't be needing it again. She balanced the knife by the handle on her middle finger. Be sure of your target, be sure of your goal. Don't think about how to get it there. Concentrate on the result you want. The way to get it there will become clear, but do not hesitate. Be sure and wholehearted, or things will not go well for you. Then, with a sideways flick of her arm and wrist, almost too quick to see, it was gone. A solid chunk from the maple tree 15 feet away revealed the knife protruding 3 inches to the right and 5 inches below the target knot. I'm getting rusty, she said around the cigarette dangling from her mouth.
Very nice. I like your dialogue. It's very true to life. Very nice. So that's from The Heretic, which is available currently now through Amazon, along with your other books. Are they available any other places people can purchase them?
Yes, it's of course it's up on Barnes and Noble as well. Goodreads, Smashwords, most of the other links. It's there, and as far as I know, anybody that's hooked into those can certainly find it.
Wonderful. Well, I wish you best of luck with them, and thank you for being a guest on my show, and please stay safe.
And I thank you. I really appreciate it's an honor to have you accept it.
My pleasure. Thank you.